theological education is going through a transitioning period, as any institution involved in the life of the church will process. I think it might be helpful if you would understand the kind of philosophy and involvement that the Haggard Graduate School of Theology has built its own focus around. We believe that in order to really do the job of theological education, there needs to be a very clear philosophy of ministry at the heart of what we do. We've come to the place in our graduate school that we believe that our field education is a very important contributing factor in the whole of what we do. We would express that in really three applications. We believe, as all seminaries would believe, or schools of theology, or divinity schools, that the academic base is critical. We concur with that. But equally critical at the Haggard School of Theology is that we feel that you have to, at the same time, make sure that your student is involved in the workplace, the marketplace, where life is really going on. And then thirdly, we believe that in order to keep both of those applications clearly focused, you must have spiritual formation. In fact, we would say in a very plain way that that spiritual formation is the glue. It's the ethical base that keeps the other two clearly working together in partnership. It would not be surprising to you if you talk to our faculty or our students or staff that the word partnership is a very emerging term in our school, in our community. Academic base is a very important aspect. We give very high priority to hiring good faculty that know their discipline, that know their field. We make sure that even though they are trained in a particular discipline, that they also know the life of the church. And we say the life of the church, we see that with equity. That means whether it be a parachurch contribution, any church agency organizations, they all fit into the whole. But the local church is that key gathering place for us. Therefore, we've got to prepare men and women to understand the heart of theological education. They've got to know their church history. They've got to know their understanding of biblical studies and all the very traditional things that a seminary or school of theology or divinity school contributes to the whole. But where there's been a break in all of this is we've been a little bit lax in the last 3 decades in really making sure that the classroom is within an ethical contribution connected to the workplace. Now, in that workplace, there needs to be a very important contributor, and that faculty member, who we believe they are, is a supervising mentor. You'll hear the word mentoring a lot. We believe that in our field ed, it's not going to work if we don't have mentors. And those mentors are resident faculty people. Those mentors are our friends out in the church ministry in differing aspects who are connected to students in a clustering accountability group that deals with them as a whole, with the issues they're dealing with the weaknesses they may be walking through, with their strengths which need to be affirmed. And in that process, which meets twice a month, sometimes a whole day session, the time of when they meet is not our core issue. Our issue would be, is there enough time where the mentor works with students to be able to really help them grow and develop appropriately in relationship to their call. In the workplace, that supervisor not only has to have a very clear understanding of philosophy of ministry, that supervisor needs to care for students, care for people. See the student coming to them as someone who's going to make a vital contribution to the work of the kingdom. They've got to be able to give them some time, quality time, assessment time. They've got to reflect with that student appropriately. The reason we say that spiritual formation is the glue is that because we believe that if there is a weakness in the life of the church today, and within our own schools of theology and or seminary or divinity school, we sometimes become so committed to investing in what we call the educational process that we forget the personal journey of the student as well as the mentor and the faculty person. Growth contracting. And that's a very good term. It goes back the last 20 years in the educational sector, and we think it works very well in seminaries and schools of theology and divinity schools. What you really do in a growth contract is you sit together as partners. Usually it's the main mentor, faculty person, it's that supervisor person and the student, and you begin to look at their own person, their call, their involvement in ministry, their weaknesses and their strengths, as best you can assess those. And then out of that, together, you agree on a growth contract for a semester, and it could be 2 semesters, where that person needs to grow in that timeline, how their mentor partners are going to work with them to do that.
I decided that I needed to go to graduate school of theology when I was in medical school. I had been 2 years into my medical school, and every time I opened the book I was thinking, what am I doing here? Why am I studying medicine? And my heart was really with ministry, and I really wanted to go into ministry full-time, basically. I was working for my father's church at the time with the students, and was praying more about it, and kept getting confirmation after confirmation about the fact that I needed to be in ministry full-time. So after about 6 months to a year of serious praying, I decided God's calling me into ministry full-time, I gotta go. Coming here to the school, I felt that one of the strengths of Azusa was its practical side, and really getting into not just the academics, but integrating everything, integrating what I did learn in the academic side, integrating what I learned in ministry, integrating my personal life, integrating all the different backgrounds and experiences from my professors and mentors and people who are leading the field ed classes. And what really benefited me was one particular field ed class that I did have with Grace Barnes. And it was a small class. It was about 5 to 6 of us. And we had such a good rapport within the class itself, and she was able to integrate everything. You know, I was going through a hard time in ministry at that time. I was going through a hard time personally, and it was just a forum for me to include everything that I'd been going through. And I actually even broke down and cried in one session, and people were praying for me. All my classmates were praying for me, and it was just a really, really good time that I had there. My advice to students who are entering the program and having to take field ed is go through it. I had some experiences where it didn't seem like I was getting as much as I had with Grace Barnes' class. But the fact of the matter was that I gained from it. The ongoing process was what was important to the whole thing. Everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs somebody that they can go to be held accountable for. Everybody needs advice. Everybody needs someone just to pray with them. I don't know how anybody would be able to go and attend a school of theology without somebody that they can go to and talk with, you know, once every 2 weeks or on a regular basis.
I was able to supervise pastors that were highly educated. Some of them had the academics, but they lacked the practical hands-on experience. I saw many of the pastors who lacked academic training. However, because of their expertise and hands-on and the practical approach to the ministry, I saw the difference. So it all pointed to the need for practical, hands-on field education training. Even more specific, in the particular area that I work with in urban, with ethnic students, I see this not only as something that they learn in school, but it's a learning style. The type of learning that an ethnic, that a third world student really appreciates is one that it has to be concrete more than abstract. Secondly, that it's got to be more relational oriented than task oriented, and more people centered than project centered or pulpit centered. So these are the things that come with field education, district superintendents and church supervisors can very easily lose personal touch with the leaders and ministers that are under them because of busy schedules, because of distance. But I feel that if we're able to get that small group, that one-to-one contact with a leader, you draw out some of the vital talent and skills that these men and women have. Education comes from, or educare, the word educare, education, comes from the Latin and means to draw out. And I've seen the talents, the skills, the abilities of the students been drawn out by the professor that is there and has a high touch in such a low touch environment that they live in. And so the secret of leadership today is not so much the masses and the great large crowds, but really more in the personal one-to-one, a phone call, a 5-minute chat with some of the leaders will draw out either their insecurities, their anxieties, but also some of the excitement and the rewards that these leaders have.
Over here we have Daniel Prieto, who pastors the Foursquare Church in Downey. And I really know of his work since I have worked with him more closely than the rest of the group. He started this church with 12 people, I believe, and there are over 400 today. And there is a special gift of pastoring, and the major tools that he has, in addition to the preaching of the Word, he has a good mind for organization and structure. And so that's part of what we throw in here. I am sure that Daniel will be able to talk to Aldo very clearly as to how to best reach the neighborhood. There are over 18 nationalities that come to his church. So when they come together and they talk, they'll come up with some very good answers that we can't find in a textbook. Then those two will come together to him and will address the issue of how to handle the different nationalities and maybe how to progress in reaching ones that he is weak at reaching, or maybe that he has not been able to discover.
One of the things that so ministers to me so much about APU is our field education program, where I get to walk one-on-one with especially the women students. And I ask them the question, when did you understand your call to ministry? And I get the old answer, when I was 7, when I was 9, when I was 14. And then we go through those same litany of questions. And what we get to do here at APU is we get to jump ahead, and we get to walk together to see where her life is going to fit into ministry. And ministry is a process, just like life is a process. Definitely our Christian life is a process. And ministry is a process. You find yourself, like me, thinking you're going to be a missionary, and then you end up like my friend Kim, who's going to be a Navy chaplain. And I think of the about 3 years that I've spent with Kim. Frankly, I run my field ad a little bit different. We meet for long, extended periods of time on Saturdays. We break bread together. We have breakfast together. And our breakfast, usually we sit around the table for about 3 hours, and then we spend 3 more hours sitting in my family room. I like to have these students at my house. I like them to get to know me as a person. I like them to meet my family, to sit in my house, and to see that John and Paul and I are just like everybody else. We love, and we fight, and we make up, and we last. We're going to last a long time, and I believe that what God is doing in the women that God is bringing to APU is a special thing. Our job is to affirm the highest calling in people's lives, and it takes time to find that out. It took time for me to find it out. It takes time for our students to find it out. And one of the things I want to do as a field ed professor is to be that kind of friend that walks with the students to help them find out what their gifts and callings are. My job is to walk with the student, and in this case it's primarily women, to see as God unfolds what her gift and her calling is, and then to walk with her. And it doesn't just happen at graduation either. We walk past graduation and in most cases remain friends, hopefully for a lifetime.
As Vicki had mentioned, it is a process for each of us, and one of the most important things for me was to be obedient to God. And originally I started the program at Azusa thinking I was going to go in the mission field. I'd spent a year in Japan and I thought I needed further training, and Azusa offered me that opportunity. As I plugged through the MAPS program, I learned that the professors wanted to know a lot about my personal life and my call, and so I had a chance to dissect God's call on my life. What happened was I finished my MAPS program and thought I was going to go in the mission field, and then God used a chaplain at the Naval Hospital where I worked to ask me a question, and he said, "Kim, what is it that God's doing in your life, and where do you want to go?" And I said to him, "You know, I don't know. I really don't know right now." And he said, "Well, we really need women in the chaplain corps. Have you ever considered?" And did you know that that morning, honestly, I felt a call on the Lord, from the Lord, a call in my spirit that perhaps he was calling me to be a chaplain.
Well, welcome to Field Ed. And just to give you a bit of orientation, I'd like to remind us that as we go through the questions today, what we're trying to do is keep three things in perspective and bring them out as we go through our time together. The first is personal. Where are you personally? How are you growing as a result of your walk with Jesus? The second part, of course, is the ministry. You're all involved in ministry, and this is the whole purpose of Field Ed, is to try to pull together your personal and ministry and make sure that there's a balance there. And then third, obviously, is the academics. Now, I wouldn't put that as the third in priority, but there's a mix here, and there's a balance that we're trying to achieve as we go through the time. So I think the first question I'd really like to ask is, what is happening in your lives personally? And don't be afraid just to speak out. Your personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
I'm excited about a lot of transitions in my life right now, and the Lord has been very close to me during this time, especially with finishing up a ministry that I've been involved with over the last 8 years, a ministry that I started in the high desert, and now that I'm leaving that ministry and going to a new area in the Olympia, Washington area. A lot of transition, moving from one culture to another. So the Lord is very close to me at this time. I'm needing to seek Him as I did at the very beginning of my ministry, looking for new direction. It's sad that you have to come to a crisis point where you start seeking Him like you did before. But there's a lesson to be learned in that as well, to stay constantly close with Him.
Someone else?
I'd like to share. I went to Promise Keepers, and I went last year, and it was okay. But this year there was some commitment that I made some commitments there, and had to come home and face them and make sure that they took place. My personal devotion time, time with meeting with other individuals, praying together, being accountable to other people. And it's really been good, but at the same time, it's been a struggle to go into this new step that God is calling me to, where my time is not really my own, but it belongs to God, and I have to be accountable for that. And so it's a real struggle for me.
I'd like to share also, Ron. As you know, because I've been in your cluster group in the past, I've had a long night of seeming contradictions and things that didn't quite seem to work out. But as I'm getting at the end of the academic aspect of this, the areas for ministry and the area of personal is beginning to blossom. I now have several opportunities, several irons in the fire that I didn't have before. The concerns that I've shared in the cluster group in the past, there is a new excitement now that something is finally going to break open.
What are some of the things that you've learned in your academic work this last week or two that have really made an impact in personal life and in your ministry?
Well, I'd like to answer that. One thing that comes to mind is just the classwork we do here and how it helps me. Just this last week in Dr. Scott's class, we were covering certain aspects of trust and faith, and I have to come up with sermons regularly, and the material that we covered in class actually helped me formulate an outline in my mind for a sermon. That's one aspect of how it helps me, and also the things that we cover in classes help me to focus my prayer life, my personal study even more, so that I feel that I can mature and grow and walk with God and Christ in a fuller understanding and application in my own life personally and in my ministry to others.
Father, we just come before you and thank you so much that we've had this time to share what's on our hearts. And in Jesus' name, it's really true.
Amen. All right. We have our meeting 2 weeks from today, and we'll be meeting back together. I'd like for each one of you to be thinking of something as you go through these next 2 weeks, and that is, what can you bring to this group that would make a difference, an idea of ministry, from ministry. We didn't talk a lot about ministry today, but what one idea from your ministry that you could bring, that you could say, I'd like to share this with you if it's of help, then you can take it away and make it yours. All right? Thank you.
You know, this ministry thing from cluster group that Ron talked about, that's the way we need to come up with this. Because these are definite issues that we face all the time.
Yeah.
It's true.
And
true. Every day.
There's so many tough issues too. Some of them really trouble me. I don't know. Maybe one of you two could help me, because I'm trying to deal with in pastoring, and I'm a junior pastor. I'm trying to deal with how to correct people in sermons, but still be uplifting and still encourage them. But yet I need to be firm, and I'm having a hard time in preparing some of these messages and being gentle yet firm. I'm just not sure how to approach it in a way.
Well, doesn't a lot of it have to be on a personal level, though, instead of across the sermon? What do you think?
Some do.
Well, I think any time we're going to give any kind of a message where we're going to be correcting, first we've got to make sure that we're right biblically, and secondly,
maybe we're doing what we're saying others should be doing.
That's right. I honestly think that it starts first with seeking God and making sure that we're doing it for the right reason too, and that's always for restoration. Correction should never be from the pulpit for retribution or for vindication, but rather it should be for restoration. And too many times I think, don't you, that the pulpit can be used in the wrong way.
You mean like a bully pulpit?
That's right.
Yeah. I've seen that happen too many times, and the reverse side of that, though, is that people from the pulpit, they never get into the hardcore issues that are really affecting the integrity of the congregation, so they tend to avoid it because they don't want to offend anybody.
We can see the importance of a mentoring relationship even through some of the things that have happened historically, biblically, as well as in American history. Jesus was mentored by his father, Joseph, as a carpenter, and we know in American society, a young man or a woman learned a trade through being mentored or through going through an apprenticeship. And so in ministry, this is very important even today, a mentoring relationship where a young person can view that older person, that model, that role model in areas of ministry so that they know how to function in that role. For example, we had a large home in the city of Pasadena a number of years ago, and at a certain time we had as many as 24 different young people who were living with us. Some, all of them had been on drugs, some had been involved in prostitution, they were involved in all types of behavior. Some of the girls were pregnant, and we brought them into our home, my wife and myself, and they became part of our family. And as a result, they are now in areas of ministry. Some of them are ministers, but all of them are successful dads and moms today. And I believe it's a direct result of having been in the family. And so when we look at the importance and the power of mentoring relationships, we can see that ministry is greatly affected by those who are involved in a mentoring relationship with those who are already involved in ministry. There are a number of incidents, even today in our society today, where we see that seasoned ministers have run into problems simply because they were not in a relationship of accountability. So all of us, and we've been in the ministry for 20-some years now, and all of us, or many of us in ministry, are seeing the importance of a relationship of accountability. And so even those who are seasoned ministers, they've been in the ministry for many years, they're seeing that that is a very important aspect of ministry, that we need to be in relationship. We need to be in relationship with role models and with just those that we can be accountable to. And so I believe that even on the university level, that if we will introduce these models before a person is even involved in ministry, so that they understand what it means to be accountable, they understand what it means to be disciplined, then they can avoid some of the problems that we are seeing today in our society and in the ministry. I am a field ed professor at Azusa Pacific University in the Graduate School of Theology. And as a field ed professor, we're also seeing the importance of mentoring relationships. We have young men and women who are training for the ministry, and we try to help them to integrate their personal lives, their spiritual lives, with their ministerial responsibilities. And we're seeing that that is very, very effective, because they are able to sit down with a mentor, and we're able to help them with a supervisor, for example, in their internship in a particular location where they're involved in ministry. But they are under the supervision of someone at the site where they're ministering, and then they also have in the School of Theology a field ed professor like myself who helps them to work their way through various problems, questions that come up, and that kind of thing. And so we're seeing the importance of a mentoring relationship for those who are preparing for ministry, rather than just sitting in a classroom and then going directly from the classroom into a ministerial position where they may not have the accountability and the discipline that they need to be successful in that particular ministry.
When we talk about the field ed experience, I think particularly the thing that sticks with me is the fact that I was with men and women who were in the trenches like I was. I wasn't simply dealing with people who were talking about theory, but I was dealing with people who were day-to-day meeting struggles as we dealt with issues in our ministry and our personal lives, juggling the different private issues we had as well as our ministry issues. I particularly remember my experiences as I was making some life-changing decisions. I was considering making an entire coastal move at that time. And it was the interaction with other men and women who were in ministry who could help me not make the decision for me, but rather who were able to give me feedback, who were able to just stand beside me at that time. And even when I ended up changing the decision, it didn't come across like, well, I must have failed, but rather it came across with that understanding that being in ministry is an ongoing growth process. You don't stop growing as a person just because you're also a minister. You know, one of the things that was particularly enjoyable to me and unique for me in the field education experience was the difference in the different clusters. Because I was in the program over a period of time, in my particular situation, most of the time you get the opportunity to be with the same group over a period of time, and so you have that opportunity for the relationships to build and those kinds of things to occur. But in my situation, because I had changed programs at one point in time, and I was only involved with urban pastors, and so I was dealing with mainly African American pastors like myself who were in the trenches, most of us in inner city situations, and dealing with some very unique and particular situations. And our perspective towards ministry was very, very unique. And I enjoyed that a great deal, and it gave me a lot of feedback. And yet, as I made a change later on to a different field ed group, a different cluster, and they weren't urban pastors, we were of different ethnic backgrounds and different ministry backgrounds. That was also very enjoyable because I was able to interpret some things from my perspective, coming as an African American pastor, and also we were able to look at how we each face issues.
11 years ago, the Friends Center was started as part of the C.P. Haggard School of Theology at Azusa Pacific University. And one of the reasons that we wanted to join with the Haggard School of Theology was because of their innovative approach to ministry. Since joining the School of Theology 11 years ago, we've been delighted with the product that has been produced by the seminary and by our role in it. I serve as director of the Friends Center, and as director, I'm responsible for recruiting, for development, for overseeing the progress and development of our students, and primarily for interfacing with the pastors and students that serve all of the various churches of Southwest Yearly Meeting. In this role, I have the dual responsibility and privilege of working with our students to ensure that they have a sound theological undergirding to their ministry and that they perform this in a context that is positive and conducive to their development. The pastors who supervise our students and the other field ed supervisors serve a vital function in allowing our students to get hands-on training so that when they complete their degree, they don't go out and ruin a first church. There is such a reputation of seminaries preparing pastors for churches that don't exist, and one of the best parts of our program has been the opportunity students have to learn firsthand what happens in a church, how to minister in a church, how to be effective in a church, so that when they graduate, they can turn around and reproduce the very types of ministry that they've been a part of during their education. That has been a delight for me to see. As director of the Friends Center, has made me very proud of the students that we produce. The product that comes out into our churches has just strengthened the Friends churches tremendously in Southwest Yearly Meeting. In fact, in recent years, we've gained a national reputation among Friends churches and are increasingly seeing interest from across the country and literally around the world for the innovative approach that we have taken to education. Several of our graduates serve Friends churches presently. I think of graduates that are serving in Indiana, Ohio, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and several who serve right here in California. One of our graduates, Jim LaShawn, is the associate pastor at Rose Drive Friends Church, presently one of the largest Friends churches in North America. Jim had done a previous master's degree at another seminary, but came back to the Friends Center to do a degree that would focus specifically on the innovative approach that we take to supervise field education in ministry while you complete your educational training. Jim continues to distinguish himself in all areas in which he serves as an educator, preacher, effective administrator, communicator, and will soon complete his doctorate in historical studies.
I've known that I wanted to be a hospital chaplain since I was in high school, and so when I started searching for a seminary to go into, I wanted to find one that had good practical experience combined with the school education. And so when I found out about APU's School of Theology, the Haggard School of Theology, I realized that it was going to really integrate very well what I want to do practically with what I need to learn spiritually. So I've been there for a year now, and I started an internship at Foothill Presbyterian Hospital in Glendora under Dr. Pam Mullock. She is my supervisor, and she's been teaching me what it is to be a chaplain, and I spend some hours with her and visiting patients during the week. From this step on, I'm going to be moving into full-time work as a hospital chaplain as an intern at Loma Linda University Hospital, and that is a 12-week program. And what all this is doing is putting together who I need to be as a person who is equipped and able to minister to people in the hospital setting. When I think about going for my CPE for the chaplaincy, I think about going for the supervisory role. So I can see myself supervising interns and helping people through the process of learning.
When I was a senior in seminary, I knew I really wanted to do pastoral care. I wasn't sure in what form, so I was working in my field education in both a church and in a hospital. And it was in that time I also knew I wanted to work on to a doctorate in both theology and psychology. It is that background in 1973-74 that I found the model that I'm using here as a supervisor at Foothill Presbyterian Hospital. I was working with a supervisor who was clinically pastorally trained, but he was brand new, so we worked as a team. We worked as equals. We would go visit patients together, and then we'd compare notes on what each of us saw when we talked to these people and prayed with them. This is the model I've been using with Lisa and Joe from Azusa Pacific, and I'm finding it very rewarding.
A person is a product of their theological education. So I look for a theological experience that has integrated the academic, the theory, with the practical, that's ministry. I believe that if a person is going to minister effectively in the church in the 21st century, then there need to be some paradigm shifts and changes from when I grew up under my theological education. For example, they taught me ministry isolation or individualism versus a team concept, being part of a supportive relationship. They taught me that I was to be a doer in ministry versus a person who is a equipper of people for ministry. I was taught to be a communicator of the Word of God versus a leader. And therefore, I also look, when I consider staff, for a person who has helped facilitate the training of leaders for ministry within the local church. And so I focus upon a person's spiritual formation, because our greatest strength is not what we do, but who we are. And out of that spiritual formation will come a person's clear direction of what God wants them to do with the ministry that He's entrusted to them. I also look for the spirit of a person, their attitude. To me, that's very important, because a person is a product of their attitude. One's attitude determines a person's perspective in life. It determines their relationship with people. It will also determine whether or not an individual focuses upon the solutions in ministry versus the problems. I also look for an individual who is an equipper, an individual that is committed to equipping people for ministry versus doing ministry. For as God blesses that ministry and it continues to grow, then one becomes limited if they're only a doer. I also look for how a person is gifted and the strengths that they have for the particular ministry that I'm looking for. For one builds off of people's strengths rather than focusing upon their weaknesses. When it comes to the integration of one's education with ministry, I believe that's best accomplished through a mentoring process. First of all, there needs to be the application of what a person is learning, and therefore it's essential that the person is involved in ministry. Then secondly, I believe it involves a mentor, someone who is going to bridge and to facilitate what is happening both between the educational side and the ministry side. And then I also believe that there needs to be an intentional plan, a process for leadership development that is taking place, first of all, in the life of the student, where there's a focus upon their personal development, their professional development, as well as their spiritual formation. And also within the life of the supervisor, because one of the important things that the church needs today, that people want today, is leadership. George Barnett took a survey among 1,000 pastors, and he discovered that only 6% of them felt that they had the spiritual gift of leadership. And the key, I believe, to church growth, to church renewal, is leadership.
Well, I think the benefit of the field education department at Azusa Pacific University, especially in the Graduate School of Theology, is absolutely invaluable to denominations, to churches. I think the pattern on which it's built is something that becomes a model across the country to other institutions, particularly because of the integration of the academic, the ministry, and the personal dimensions of the individual ministerial candidate. And I guess if I were looking for candidates who are coming through the university or in preparation for ministry, I would hang a lot of weight on the fact that they have actually been part of the field education system at Azusa Pacific, because it tells me that they have developed in the personal dimension. It tells me that they've received a solid academic education. But beyond that, it tells me that they have been able to actually perform under the mentorship of an individual who has had oversight and invested in their lives for particular ministry areas. In accomplishing that, what it tells me also is that they've had the experience of having seen an individual church leader walk through the various pitfalls of ministry, see the dynamics, and be able to come through the other side in win-win situations with success in ministry. Beyond that also, it tells me that the capacity of that ministerial student has been expanded. You know, we can send individuals in to pastor a church, and they may go into a small situation, and what winds up happening is they become imprinted with what I call the small church or unsuccessful DNA. Whereas if they've been able to work under a mentor pastor in a growing, healthy environment, that DNA has then been imprinted on them, so that when they step into ministry, they know what it looks like, they have it inbred in who they are, and they have the capacity to lead a congregation in that kind of growth. All of this is based on the premise that the best predictor of future performance is past behavior. And if an individual has had the experience of seeing that kind of behavior modeled and mentored into them over the course of a field education experience, I have the confidence then that their past behavior within that context predicts, therefore, high positive performance in leading a healthy and growing church. So if I were to see that, for example, on a resume of a ministerial candidate coming to me asking for a position within my district, it would carry a significant amount of weight. I'd be able to talk to the individual that has had oversight. I'd be able to trust the institution, which I do, and I would be able to recognize that the experience this person has had has effectively prepared them for future ministry. Now, the fact that I'm aware of APU's paradigm of ministry and the philosophy of education that they have gives me high confidence, because I know that the Graduate School of Theology has built itself on preparing ministers who have had a high degree of pragmatic, practical experience to produce health and growth within the context of the local church. So it would mean a tremendous amount to me to see that on a resume, or to recognize that in a conversation with someone who's asking for a ministry position within my district.